Okay, we will extend our discussion on compound interest to the concept of inflation. So as we know, when we are living in an inflation, what we have is an economic condition where the prices of goods and services are higher than they are used to be. Inflation is usually expressed in percent. We already heard this before. Inflation rate. So let's say if the inflation rate is 7%. So the prices of goods are 7% higher than they are used to be. Inflation decreases the purchasing power of your money. So what does that mean? For example, with 100 pesos, you will be able to buy 5 apples, let's say. If we have a 7% inflation in that particular year, the next year that you buy apples with the same amount of money with 100 pesos, maybe you won't be able to afford 5 apples. Maybe you will now be able to, let's say, afford only 4 or 3 apples with the same amount of money. Okay? So you are losing the purchasing power of your money when there is inflation. Let's illustrate this with one more example. So let's say you wanted to buy a large screen television amounting to 1,500 pesos. But you decided to invest your money first instead of buying the TV that moment in the hope of garnering enough interest so that you will be able to not only buy the TV but other goods as well. So, for example, you invest your money in an account paying 6% compounded monthly. And if you do the math, after 1 year, your money will be $1,592.52. Meaning to say, uh, you were able to get an interest of $92.52. However, unfortunately for you, during that year, the inflation rate was 7%. So 1% higher than the interest of your investment. That means the price of the television will be 7% higher during the next year. So instead of only amounting to $1,500, you add the 7% of that amount, which is 105. The price of the large screen TV is now $1,605, which means that your investment did not paid off very much since you can no longer afford now the television set. Your money is only 1,592 and you are short by by a bit a bit of an amount since the TV now costs 1,605 due to the inflation rate. So you actually lost the purchasing power of your 1,500 or of your amount. Inflation rate also has an effect on your salary, of course. So if you want to buy the same goods or services with your annual salary, your company must give you a yearly increase to deal with inflation, since the prices of goods are expected to increase due to the inflation. To calculate the effect of inflation, we will use the formula. We will use the same procedure, the same formula that we use when we compute for the compound amount. When we are dealing with inflation in real life, it fluctuates, meaning to say it varies from time to time. But to simplify, for our example, we will assume that the inflation rate in a particular year is constant. But again, in real life, it varies dramatically. So our formula, again, is the same with that of the compound amount. A will be equal to P times quantity 1 plus I raised to the big N. Let's see that. Let's apply that in an example. Suppose your annual salary today is $35,000. you want to know what an equivalent salary will be in 20 years. So how much should your salary be in 20 years if you want to be able to buy the same things and to afford the same services? If you want to have the same purchasing power, let's assume that the inflation rate is 6%. So again, your R before was your compound interest, but in inflation problems, your R is your inflation rate. So your R is 6%, 0.06 in decimal form. The inflation rate, just as we said a while ago, is in annual, and it is always constant. So that means compounding happens annually or only once a year. So your N will be 1. That makes our calculation much easier, no? I will be R divided by N. 0.06 divided by N is 1 since annual inflation rate. Compounding happens only once. So 0.06. Big N is equivalent to the product of small n times t. Small n is 1, and again, you want to know how much your salary should be in 20 years if you want to have the same purchasing power. So n times t is equivalent to 1 times 20 or 20. So again, using the formula A equals P 1 plus I raised to the big N, your salary per year today is 35,000 times 1 plus 0.06 raised to 20. So 1 plus 0.06 is of course 1.06. Raise that to the power of, to the 20th power, you get 3.20 and so on. You multiply that by 35,000 and your salary in 20 years, if you want to enjoy the same goods and services, should be $112,249.74. Imagine how much larger. Inflation would also have an effect on the purchasing power of your insurance or the purchasing power of future money. Inflation weakens the future purchasing power of your money. That means if you will receive money or if you will receive premium from your insurance 1 year or 2 years or 5 years from now, you will be able to buy lesser goods than if you spend it now. Okay? So if you will receive an inheritance of, let's say, 1 million in 10 years' time, you will actually be able to buy lesser goods and services than if you spend that 1 million today, than if you receive that 1 million today because of inflation. So that means if we have insurance problem and we are given with inflation rate, what we need to solve for is not the compound amount or the future value, but the present value. So that means we will be using the formula P equals A divided by 1 plus I raised to the big N. And just like last time, we will assume a constant inflation rate per year. That means our compounding is annually still. Okay? Let's see that in calculation. Suppose you purchase an insurance policy in 2010 that will provide you with $250,000 when you retire in 2045, so in 35 years time. Assuming an annual inflation rate of 8%, what will be the purchasing power of $250,000 in 2045? So using the present value formula, your R is 8% and T, the number of years between 2010 and 2045 is 35 years. So the inflation rate is an annual rate, as we have said a while ago. So your N is 1. So to compute for your I, that's just the division of R divided by N. So R, 8% divided by 1 is 8%, or in decimal form, 0.08. Big N is the product of small n times t. N is, since we are compounding annually, 1 times 35 in 35 years' time. So big N is 35. So using the formula A divided by 1 plus I raised to the N, big N, P will be, in the future, what you will receive is $250,000. So that's your A. All over 1 plus 0.08, which is 1.08. Raise that to the power of 35th, or to the 35th power. So your 2,000, or your 2,250, your $250,000 will be divided by 14.78, and so on. And you will realize that your $250,000 will only have a purchasing power equivalent to 16,908.64 due to inflation. Okay? So that amount that you are imagining you will receive by 2045, which is $250,000, you will not be able to buy that much amount of goods and services. You will only be able to buy 16,908 amount of goods and services due to inflation, or if you account for inflation.